Welcome to GTM Wonderland. I'm your host, Niki, and today I have the pleasure to welcome Andrei Faji to the podcast. Andrei is founder and principal strategist of On-Brand Labs, which helps B2B challenger brands close a gap between the promise they make and the experience they deliver. Andrei has extensive marketing and brand experience at SaaS companies across the globe, and I've been super lucky to have worked with him on the same team. On top of that, he's also one of the most genuine people I've ever worked with, and I share that opinion with many others in the SaaS community. Without further ado, welcome Andrei.
Thank you for having me, Niki. Thank you for the generous and sincere welcome. I appreciate it.
Of course. Is there anything you'd like to add to that intro?
I don't know if I can really top that. That was incredible. Let's not ruin it. That was just too perfect.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the recent launch of On-Brand Labs, or I'd have to say official launch. And I really briefly described it in the intro, but I want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about your new venture.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. And there's never really a perfect time to start something new. But, you just kind of hit a certain point in time where you're like, well, I think it's now or never. I don't know why, but I think it's now or never. And, I guess the origin story of On-Brand Labs came from over a decade of working in-house in a number of SaaS and fintech companies. I've been doing marketing for quite some time, leading brand, product marketing, customer marketing, really looking at the full life cycle of how companies engage with both prospects and existing customers. And I've run into the same pattern of finding these disconnects between what a company promises or how it projects itself and what customers actually experience when they're using the product, when they're interacting with the team, or they're receiving a service. So we can tell great stories as marketers. That's part of our job. But if those stories are not being reflected in the actual experiences that our customers have, what are we actually doing? Right? So that's really where this idea was born. And, when people think about brand, which I'm sure we're going to get into, there's so many misconceptions, especially in B2B SaaS. I think in more consumer focused industries, there's more appreciation around the essence of brand, the investment into brand. But B2B SaaS, which I've been a part of for over a decade, is definitely lagging. And while things are certainly improving, it's important to clarify and define what exactly is a brand, because it's not what most people think it is.
Oh, that's a bit of a cliffhanger right there. I want to start diving into that topic. During our prep session, we were really going into this topic as well, which is a discussion about brand. What is brand these days, and how does brand strategy fit into that, or even business strategy? And now you've reintroduced us to the term of customer experience. How does it all come together in your world?
Yeah, well, so what is it, and then how does it all connect? Well, I think most people know that the origins of the term around branding was actually around cattle branding. So ranchers needed to, create a way to identify which of their cattle belong to their ranch versus, somebody else's ranch. And these are thousands of acres of land. So these cattle would be very free range, right? They would roam around long distances, but there was branding on the cattle was how it was easy to identify. And over the culmination of, sort of post-industrial revolution, as organizations started investing in advertising, branding evolved a bit. It was no longer just the visual identification of a company or a product. It then kind of evolved into including advertising, namely print, television, and radio. And then, of course, this thing called the internet was born. And then from there, it kind of extended into the digital landscape, where branding was no longer just about the physical media, but then it became about the digital media as well. And we can kind of pause there, because that's a whole rabbit hole we can get into later. But fundamentally, all people are interacting with brands on a daily basis. Whether they're interacting in an actual transaction or recalling a memory, those are all the byproducts of branding. We remember certain logos, we remember certain taglines, jingles, which are never used in B2B marketing for whatever reason, are highly effective ways to drive memory recall. So, as we kind of think about the customer's perception, that is really where brand lives. There's, of course, a series of decisions companies make around the way they want to present themselves in the market. But ultimately, brand is the story that our customers are telling themselves when they think about you. And that's I think, the fundamental bridge that needs to be built between how we think about brand and then how brand is actually realized in the minds of our customers. And that's where, of course, product plays a huge role. That's also where customer service plays a huge role. The way you sell and the purchase experience plays a huge role. And in many ways, kind of going back, to On Brand Labs and my mission, it really is about connecting those two worlds together, where there's intentionality around the experiences, the words, the atmosphere that a company creates. And that's actually reflected to match the narrative, the perception, the expectations of a customer. So, customer experience, brand, they all overlap. They're all one and the same. I'm sure we've all had these experiences where you see something from the outside and it looks really interesting and attractive, and maybe it's a really cool new retail store or a new product that you want to buy, but then you actually go into the store, as an example of like a brand new retail store down the street, and it smells terrible in there, or the customer service is awful. It doesn't matter how great the merchandise is. That's going to affect your perception. That's going to play a role in the story you tell yourself when you walk out of that store around the experience. So it's really impossible to silo brand from the customer experience, because they really are one and the same. And ultimately, as businesses think about, well, how do I bring those two worlds together, and what's the right method, and where should I be intentional and lean in? That's then really a conversation around strategy. So there's those three components. What is your strategy? What is the promise that you're making in the market to a very specific segment of customers that you want to serve and support and help and delight? And then how are you reflecting that in every single touch point that customer experiences when they're interacting with you?
Great summary. Thank you. You brought up a few really interesting points, which we'll dive into throughout the episode. But first, you mentioned the challenge of silos within companies. Why do you think, and I find especially in B2B companies, are these elements and experiences so siloed still?
Well, there's a few reasons. There's a few sort of core problems, and then there's like root causes of all of those problems. But, one of the problems, and we're going to use B2B SaaS, obviously, since that's like our focus industry, or as the metaphorical example. First of all, most B2B SaaS products are coming from, typically, not always, a product and or engineering mindset. So it's focused on efficiency. It's focused on optimization. It's about tracking and attributing and moving things along. And that's fine. All those things are incredibly important in terms of the health of a business on a balance sheet. However, it's the asymmetrical opportunities, it's the surprise and delight moments, it's the genuine human experience that customers have with a company that ultimately shape their perception around the quote unquote brand. So when we think about this and we kind of like unpack what does that actually look like and mean, it means that brand is not something that marketing is solely responsible for. It means brand is something that a sales representative is responsible for. When they're having a first interaction with a prospect, how are they presenting themselves? And then as a byproduct of how are they presenting themselves, how is that reflecting on the company that they work with? Secondarily, when you bought the product and you're getting to use it, and you made a six-figure investment to bring in a new platform into your organization. So you had to go through finance budget approvals, you had to go through procurement, you had to have that sort of cross-functional alignment to ensure, okay, which people on which teams do we need to get licenses for? There's then an adoption curve that needs to happen. You're the person who made the decision to buy the product, but now you have 25 people across your organization who are going to use it. Are they going to have the same perceptions as you, even though you're the one that was actually predominantly driving the conversations with the sales vendor, as an example? How do you get everybody to understand the reasons behind it, how to use it, how to get value out of it? That's also brand. Because the vendor, I like to think of it in a couple of ways, actually. I think of it through emotions. If you put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, they are actually doing more internal selling than the vendor has to do, because they are going to become your champion. They're going to be the ones that are going to say, yes, we need this thing. This product can absolutely support our workflows. It's going to help us save time. It's going to help us become more productive. So you're evangelizing this now internally. But remember, very few people in your organization have the same exact mindset as you. So they're looking to you to make the right call. You have to bring them into that experience. You have to explain to them why vendor A is better for us than vendor B. And what do you typically lean on when you have those internal conversations, or you have to bring this back to the CFO? Well, you typically start with, so-and-so at this company uses this. They have customers all over the world. It's that brand reputation that's almost the starting point of internally selling, versus vendor B, who might actually even have a better product, but nobody's heard of them. Nobody knows them. Nobody knows of anybody that's used them. Well, now you have to climb a much steeper hill to get that kind of internal buy-in. So you can talk about, well, this is a more cost-effective option, or, these guys offer free customer support, even though vendor A, from the more reputable brand, you have to actually pay extra if you want to have some type of, dedicated customer support. Or vendor B, though nobody's ever heard of them before, they actually have guarantees that if you don't go live in X amount of time, we're going to get our money back. Vendor A doesn't do that. So you have to then go down the list of all the reasons, all the qualifications, all the justifications around how you've rationalized that decision. And the psychology behind it, when you think about that customer or prospect, I should say, who's doing the internal selling, what's the number one thing that they have on the line that they're afraid of? It's their reputation. They don't want to be known as the person that brought in a product that no one sees value in. And now you're spending the company's money. I mean, people get fired for that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of fear oftentimes that's associated specifically in B2B around, maintaining and protecting your existence within an organization. It's about status and affiliation. You want to be perceived by your colleagues and your boss a certain way because you want to be affiliated with this type of company that you're working with. So that's the challenge that a lot of founders and CEOs need to think about when they're thinking about projecting a narrative, a story, their brand in the market. Is it's not about hype. It's about delivering on a set of expectations that you've created and doing it consistently over time. That's really what shapes the brand experience.
And it's a good example because you mentioned the fear and the reputation behind, what it could cost to a person, let's say onboarding a new tool or a new vendor or product. And I think we've all been there, right? Where everything looked fantastic in the sales calls or the demos, and then you onboard that new vendor or you sign for that new product, to onboard on your organization, and it's actually really not what it was in the demo. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely thankfully I think as marketers we might not always be on the side of the business where that's detrimental for us in our careers, but I can imagine a lot of other buyers in specific roles and departments of the company are. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'm curious if you have any recent examples of really great and pretty terrible customer experience that you've witnessed.
I mean, I experience them every day, both great and terrible. I'm going to probably answer that um, a little bit differently, though. I'll give you a real life example of a client I'm working with. So, this is a challenger brand. They sell to IT leaders. They have a software that helps manage a lot of their IT services within an organization. And it's a very solid product. Um, they've been around for about 14 years. They've got customers all over the world, but they're not a huge company. In fact, they have three competitors that are larger than them, and two of the three have only been around for less than 10 years. So my client's been around longer. They have a very strong product, but there are competitors that have emerged over the past decade or so that have outgrown them, and they're targeting the exact same type of, person within an organization. So, in these types of category dilemmas, we see that a lot of companies over-index on product capabilities. That is what they distinguish as a moat, something that will protect them and carve a space in the market just for them that they can own. So they think like, well, we're going to build the best product. We're going to add the most features. We're going to integrate AI into this thing now. Whatever you want to add to it, that is where they put their focus. And largely, obviously, within the context of B2B, the product absolutely does matter. But I did a little bit of qualitative research, and I did some deep interviews with about a dozen IT buyers. So these are people who are, in senior roles within the organization. And I asked them a set of questions around how they evaluate vendors, what their biggest pain points are in terms of vendor perceptions, and then what are the internal politics within their organization that they have to navigate through. And across the board, what I heard most consistently, over 90% of the people that I spoke with kept bringing up one theme, which is a disdain and profound distrust towards vendors. Now, maybe this is partially because they're in IT roles. So they're like, I have no interest in talking to a salesperson. I want to fix technical problems. So that might be potentially one of the reasons why they have such a disdain towards vendors. But the common experience that I heard was we got excited in the past about a product. We had an amazing demo, but when we actually bought the thing, it didn't match what we saw in the demo. Certain features weren't available based on the tier, the package that we
Ouch.
purchased. The vendor increased their pricing, within 12 months of us signing a contract, which then put us at risk for planning and forecasting our own budgets. And after we bought the product, we didn't really hear anything from their support team. There was no real connection or relationship built. It was purely transactional. Anytime we needed help, it was on us to obviously reach out to the vendor. Countless times, it would take 2 or 3 emails before we got a response. A lot of these individuals just feel burnt, right? And that is the reality. Again, going back to the customer experience, that is the reality of their experiences. And it doesn't matter what you say, it really only matters what you do in those situations as a company, the strategic bets that you make and the way that you serve your customers. There's, at the same time, a mindset shift that I think needs to occur in order to connect those two worlds between the brand promise and the customer experience. And the mindset shift is really empathy. It's literally putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you serve. and it's impossible sometimes to know all the granular details, but there's an essence, there's a component that if you talk to enough customers, you're going to catch certain themes like the ones that I just mentioned around why the people that I spoke with felt jaded towards SaaS vendors because of those collective experiences that shaped that perception. So when you connect those two worlds together, you can start having more tangible conversations around brand. When somebody fills out a form on our website, how are we going to show up? What do we tell them? When somebody comes on a first call and meets an account executive, how are we going to present ourselves? When someone just purchased a 6-figure contract with a commitment of the next 3 years, what's our plan to provide ongoing support and actually give them more than they thought that they purchased versus the opposite, which is what typically happens. They're going to get less than they thought that they purchased. So these are the discussions that I like to have, with founders, with owners of businesses, because that's, again, the collective shaping of customer touch points accumulates into these perceptions. Again, brand is not a thing. It's the byproduct of many things working together for your customers over time. So it requires consistency. It requires dedication. You have to actually follow through. And it also requires patience because it's not going to happen overnight. It's those accumulation and compounding effect of all those touch points working together to create a certain set of expectations that you deliver every single time. And many organizations, the way they're kind of set up, you have functional leaders who are solely focused on the KPIs of their department. So if you're in sales, all you care is how much revenue are we generating. If you're a B2B SaaS marketer, you care about are we on the right channels? Is our traffic increasing? Are we driving more of the right people over to sales? If you're in customer success, your KPIs are around customer satisfaction or speed of onboarding or implementation. But what is a unifying story when you connect all those KPIs together? That those functional leaders have a North Star that's not centric to their organization and a sort of revenue target, but actually the lived experience of a customer. If you can answer that question, that is the beginning foundation of having a brand strategy. We want people to feel a certain way every time they use their product or they talk to us. How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think? And then what are you going to do over time operationally to deliver that?
Easy, right? It sounds so easy, but I wish it was. I wanna take it back to one of the things you said earlier on. We started with a history lesson a little bit on brand and how it all started with cattle and how obviously different marketing channels started to be implemented from there. And when I last spoke to you, we had a conversation about digital marketing and how that has potentially ruined marketing a little bit, especially in the SaaS industry. And I love how you just brought up the example from the IT buyer, because the IT buyer must be the most jaded persona
I think it's actually a
in the industry.
qualification. If you're an IT person and you're interviewing for a job, I think the hiring manager needs to be like, "Are you a jaded person? Because if you're not, you're not going to be a good fit for this role."
Exactly. How jaded are you? It's like
Yeah,
scale 1 to 10. 10, you're
exactly.
hired. So yeah, back to the digital marketing piece, which it's been. I used to market to IT buyers quite a few years ago at one of the largest networking companies out there, and yeah, it was a great time for marketing, but I'm sure the IT buyers were pretty jaded by all the vendors out there. Anyway, so one thing that's been on my mind as well was when we previously spoke was the 4 Ps of, would you say go to market, the 4 Ps of marketing, the 4 Ps of business? I feel like it's such a fundamental that so many of us haven't really gotten in our kit of fundamentals anymore that we need to just highlight this again.
Yeah. So you're right. The four P's, that is really like the classical definition of marketing and what marketing, specifically before digital advertising really turned into what it is today. That's really what marketing used to be responsible for. And you see it a lot more. You don't see it in B2B SaaS, but you see it a lot more in consumer facing industries, consumer packaged goods, as an example, even in retail, restaurants, etc. But the four P's make up really like what marketing in a mature organization is responsible for. In B2B SaaS, you really have one P, and we'll get into what that one P is, one of those four Ps. But again, just for definitions, the four Ps stand for pricing, promotion, product, and placement. Those are the four Ps. So let's get into each one. So pricing, it's a huge expression of the brand, you know? Are you a premium product, for an affluent market? Or are you a far more affordable and budget friendly product for mass market, as an example? Well, marketing traditionally has kind of helped define that. And they're not only looking at what makes sense for our business, obviously they have to think about that, but also what are customers willing to spend and how much are they willing to pay for a certain product? Because again, there are certain products out there that are just as good as a premium brand product, but they're a fraction of the price. You're not really paying for the product, you're paying for the brand and the reputation and the expectations that come with using that product. Great example here, look at Lexus and Toyota. They're fundamentally the same car. They use a lot of the same parts in their engines. The real only difference is the cosmetics. Lexus is obviously the luxury version of a Toyota. But as someone that's owned a Lexus SUV, I've gone to the mechanic and I was able to fix certain parts with Toyota parts, even though it's a
Mm.
Lexus vehicle. So you're really paying more for the brand, and that's why pricing used to be something that the marketing leader, a CMO, would own. Then you have promotion, and this is the one P that actually still exists and only exists in B2B SaaS. And promotion is everything most people actually think it is in B2B SaaS. Are you getting the word out there? Are you advertising? Are we doing the right sponsorships? How is that impacting both short-term and long-term sales? That's the part of the four Ps promotion that is the myopic focus of the marketer leading a B2B SaaS company. Then there's product. Well, product, as we kind of said it earlier on in B2B SaaS, typically comes from a founder with a technical background. So, very well intentioned and sincere, entrepreneurs who know how to build great things, probably because of a series of experiences and pains that they had in the past using either an alternative product and it just wasn't doing what they needed it to do. So they built something newer and better, or the absence of a product and they were doing something very manually or DIY. And they're like, hey, I have the technical wherewithal to build a tool that's going to do this for me. Now we have a software. Again, traditionally, marketers used to shape what products we're going to invest in. They would do market research. They would do focus groups. They would do a ton of user experience interviews, and they would collect that information and assimilate it and turn it into a prototype of something that they wanted to build. And then they would hand that off to, the department in the company that actually produces the products. But marketing had a seat at that table and was saying, like, this is what I think the customers really want. This is going to help us grow and differentiate in the market. And then the last one is place, which is distribution. Um, and if we kind of put that in the context of digital marketing as well as B2B SaaS, placement, it's not like in the retail world where it's like which retailers do we want to merchandise our products in? Where within the store do we want to be seen? That's where visual identity plays a role as well. When you think about branding, what kind of iconography, what kind of colors and imagery do we want to package our product in so it's going to stand out? and distinguish itself amongst competitive products. The placement of those products doesn't really apply as much in B2B SaaS, but it was one of the four fundamentals of those four Ps that a CMO in a traditional organization would typically own. And like I mentioned previously, if you think about both of us have worked in B2B SaaS marketing. Most of the work that we do is deduced into a single P, promotion. Product figures out what the market wants and builds it. Finance sits down and determines, here's how we're going to price it. Here's how we're going to maximize our profitability. This is where we're willing to take some losses because we see upside and gain down the road over here. And in many ways, sales has kind of replaced marketing, even when it comes to placement, because typically sales are in the field. They're going out meeting with prospects. They're going to networking events. They're going to trade shows. There's the ones that are kind of taking the company, the brand, and therefore the product out into the market and figuring out, where do I want to be seen so I can talk to these types of people? So then marketing basically does, well, make the banners look really beautiful, give us a really catchy tagline, make sure we can track all the leads that are coming in. Good job, marketer. You guys have done great work here. Well, it's an absolute reduction of what marketing is. Marketing is truly the acute awareness of the market. Anything that touches the marketing theoretically should be ultimately owned by the marketing leader. So products are getting touched by customers in the market. Marketing should have a say in that experience. Sales are having conversations in the field with prospects. Marketers should have a point of view around where we're going, where we want to be seen, and what we're going to say when we're there. And again, when we go back to the definition of brand, it really is the culmination, the combination of all those things together that kind of shapes a perception of an organization and their products.
This will resonate with so many people out there, especially the marketers amongst us, because I was thinking as you were explaining, when we even just look at pricing, I think in my 10+ year career, there's only been one company where I've ever been involved in anything related to pricing conversations. So that just goes to show. And I've worked at more than one company, just for reference. Yeah. It's, how do you see that evolving, you think? Do you think we're on a path where we're getting more involved again in these elements of the business, or do we have a long way to go?
Depends on the day, The short answer is I don't know. But I think that there is an earnest effort, and I've seen this in the marketing communities that I'm a part of, for this new generation of marketers in leadership positions who realize that over the past 15 years, they've kind of been reduced and they haven't been able to really maximize the capacity of the value they can drive for an organization. So I do see an earnest effort amongst marketers right now to study the fundamentals. I started my professional career in marketing in the early 2010s, and I remember at that time, even though I had worked previously with agencies, creative agencies, I remember that at that time, the perception amongst what we call performance marketers was, oh yeah, that creative work, it's arts and crafts, it's fluff, it's nice to have, but it's not necessary. Those things don't actually matter, because we have the data to prove that we are driving performance and impact for the company. We're driving leads. So you have all of these playbooks, inbound go-to-market, content-led marketing, partner-led marketing. What does that actually mean? What do those things even really mean? We're just making up terms now. Again, it's because once digital advertising really kind of caught the wave, it gave so many marketers in our industry the ability to justify their existence. And it made it really hard for those on the more creative background side to have that same narrative with the CFO or the CEO. There's always exceptions. of course. Like I was fortunate to work in an organization with a CEO who cared deeply about brand and would probably obsess more than required on, the font and the spacing and, the images that we were using. But he fundamentally understood that there's a perception he's trying to create in the market, and that identity mattered deeply to him. But I would say that that's the exception. It's not the norm. You know, most of the time, the focus is on how many leads did marketing generate? How many of those leads did sales close? And are we on track to hit our growth targets this quarter or this year? Those are typically the questions that sales and marketing receives. So it's been reduced into this. And again, now with digital advertising, you had this new generation of marketers. I was one of them. I am one of them that
Same.
were essentially raised in this culture of what matters and what doesn't. And I'm paraphrasing here, but over the years, I heard a ton of anecdotes like, well, if you can't measure it, it's not important. And that is so fundamentally backwards, it's laughable. In fact, when you think about that statement and how it applies to anything else in life, it just falls flat on its face. How do I measure the ROI of how much love I have for my wife? It's impossible to quantify. How do I measure the fact that I still remember the infamous Bud Light commercials from the 90s, with the frogs? I can't quantify that. But 35 years later, I still remember it. That's not going to show up on a spreadsheet somewhere. That's definitely not going to be showing up in my marketing automation tools around like email opens and, how many product page visits did I get this week? None of that stuff. Those are all very short-term metrics. But because we have the data, we got the data, our generation then felt like, well, our work is done now. As long as we're hitting our numbers, we're justifying our existence. Therefore, we're safe. We're good. And most people in organizations are hardwired to operate that way. Why? Status and affiliation. I want my boss to see me as an accountable, responsible, driver of the business. So I'm going to show my boss the numbers that she wants to see. And that's all I'm going to focus on, nothing else. It's not really about innovation. It's not about asymmetrical opportunities to create distinction. It's not about genuine and sincere moments that a company has to surprise and delight their customers. It's none of those things. And in best case scenarios, because I have been fortunate, to lead brand in large B2B SaaS organizations, in the best case scenarios, when you can run campaigns that are creative, that are provocative, that gives you a little bit of that marketer's high, like, oh, wow, we just pulled something off super crazy. But it's still hype at the end of the day. And hype is fleeting. That's different. An effective campaign is different than a codified, consistent, and salient brand experience. If you and I wanted to brainstorm for half a day and come up with a advertising campaign, I'm positive that between you and me, we could come up with some pretty wild ideas. And some of them might be actually quite good. But again, now we're chasing the hype. We're not chasing the long-term, consistent, disciplined ethic to creating a distinct reputation across the entire organization. We're not the ones that are coming into product meetings, customer success meetings, sales meetings with deep insights around our target audience and who we're trying to serve. The tragedy with digital advertising to me is it gave these marketers, myself included, an opportunity to hide behind performance numbers and not go out in the market and sit down and talk to real people, real customers. I don't know too many marketing leaders who consistently are talking to their customers. I just had this conversation yesterday, actually, with a client,
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of
Me
those
neither.
things where, yeah, it's one of those things where I would say to a marketer, especially someone younger in their career who is looking at the world now and being like, well, how can I get a seat at the table? What do I need to do? I mean, now AI might come and replace my job, and it can run ad campaigns better than me. It can optimize email sequences. It can work faster. It can all of those things, right? The way you earn a seat at the table is you know your customers better than anybody else in the organization. And fundamentally, traditionally, that's what the marketer, the marketing leader would do. You go in and you educate the organization on not just what people tell you, but how they actually think and what their behaviors are like. And once you get to that level of insight, creating alignment around reality and facts, not just data points from your marketing automation tool, but from hundreds of conversations over years with your customer base. You become the internal expert and you become the chief customer advocate. That's really what the CMO should be.
Great take. You briefly touched on the topic of AI, the big topic out there at the moment, and something we can't really deny. I wanted to get your take on AI and customer experience. I mean, it's pretty clear from what we've been discussing today, but just highlighting that topic for a moment.
Yeah, so like what are my general thoughts on how AI is going to impact marketing or
Yes.
brand or okay.
Or all the above.
So let me just, before I give you my answer, let me just give you some context in how I think, which is anytime an idea is being pushed really, really hard on me, I become very skeptical. That's just the way I'm hardwired, for better or for worse. It could be a great idea, but if it's pushed really hard and if it's always in my ears, it's going to turn me off. And that's kind of, how I'm feeling about AI right now. If I'm going to be honest with you, I have a level of fatigue because it's so obvious to me that there is a campaign happening. And when I say campaign, I'm not implying that, there's a conspiracy and it is organized by like one sole group of people and infiltrating everywhere. But it kind of is a snowball effect of a few um, tech oligarchs, for lack of better words, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to drive this change and then get everybody else on board. So they're the big companies. They're the ones that have the credibility in AI. And now all these smaller companies feel like if we don't adopt this stuff, we're going to get left behind. If you actually look at the evidence behind that claim and the amount of investments that companies have made in AI over the past 2 years, I think Bain recently published maybe 3 or 4 months ago a really interesting study. 75% of organizations who have made meaningful investments in AI in the United States over the past 2 years have yet to see any type of ROI in terms of productivity gains or revenue growth. I think that's interesting. Now, one could
Mm-hmm.
argue, well, just give it time. These are early adopters. AI is only going to get better. And that all might be true. So I'm not going to argue against that point. We're still very much in the early stages of AI development and LLMs specifically, not true generative AI. But at the same time, there is a lot of hype. And that hype is creating this gold rush effect where everybody feels the FOMO. If I don't have this thing, I will be left behind. While neglecting the fundamentals in your business that are agnostic of AI, whether it's AI augmented or AI driven or AI supplemented, what have you. They're ignoring the fundamentals around how are we showing up for our customers? When we have a first conversation, what are the most meaningful questions that we can ask and what impression do we want to leave behind with a prospect? How are we thinking about our purchase experience to make it delightful and easy, knowing that with procurement, there's going to be tons of back and forth and redlining a contract. There's going to be a high emotional state because that the buyer is again like, okay, this is the moment of signing the contract. We're about to spend $150,000. You know, I hope this works, right? I've spent months convincing the rest of the organization we need this thing. And then, you know, going back to even some of the insights I got from one of my clients in the IT space, you're dealing with a group of buyers that have been jaded, right? They are jaded. They've had a series of terrible experiences with vendors. And those experiences sometimes were product driven experiences, again, features or functionality that wasn't actually compatible with their business, or there's a certain key integration that the product doesn't support. Those are all product deficiencies. But the common thread I heard again was, yeah, we feel like it's just a transaction. After we bought the thing, you know, we don't have a relationship with the business versus a customer success person or even a customer support person who is a real human being, who is empathetic, understands the technical side of the problem inside and out, but also provides the comfort and the reassurance through a human to human experience that alleviates pain and pressure and anxiety from the buyer. These are the things that have nothing really to do with AI. They have everything to do with culture and mindset and the type of reputation you're creating in the market, because business to business is just people selling and working with other people, right? That's all it really is.
It still is.
It still is, and it will continue to be that way. So while I know that it's inevitable, AI will continue to grow and change the way we work and change the way even we potentially buy products, but it won't change our own relationship that we have with the status and affiliation that we want to project being a member in society, a member of society, a member within an organization. Those are the things that you carry that personal reputation. You know, it's all on you, and it's how you carry yourself. It's the way you communicate. It's the way you're able to collaborate with team members, the way you're able to think strategically. These are things that will not be changed by AI. And it doesn't surprise me that, you know, tech is the first to kind of go all in on AI because it's sort of like the nature of our industry, right? Where we whether we're marketers or salespeople or engineers, like we work in a technical digital industry with digital products. So we're going to be first in line to adopt AI. But, you know, I kind of go back to what are the fundamentals of the business? What are the real moments of opportunity in the customer journey to create distinction, to help make buying easier for your customers? I mean, we forget, like, it's really annoyingly hard sometimes to buy a product from a vendor. I had a situation a month ago where I was just trying to see a demo with a very large company. It took 10 email exchanges before I was able to book a time to see a
Oof.
demo. Now, I remember I shared this experience on LinkedIn and somebody like commented like, this is exactly why AI is going to be so great because you don't have to deal with dumb people who don't reply to your emails. AI is going to take care of all of that. That might be true, but if the leadership of an organization creates the conditions for a group of people to neglect their customers, I'm not convinced that they're going to be terribly responsible with how they implement AI to augment any workflows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what I think about all of this is I don't know where this is going to go. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could know for myself, you know, like what is this all going to look like in 10 or 15 years? But I know what it can't fix. And it can't fix people's mindsets. It can't fix culture. And it can't really fix how we interact and relate to other people, as well as how we project ourselves.
I want to get into a few more practical topics next and really driving it back to you and making this about you and On Brand Labs. Let's have a look at your specific method when you are onboarding a new client, for example, yourself, or you're starting work for a new client, and we've brought up the term of mystery shopping. How do you approach that when you start a new on a new project? What's your playbook?
Yeah, no, this is the really fun part for me because, every client is going to be a little different. They might be in slightly different categories. Even if there's two software companies, one is focused on salespeople, the other one is focused on IT people. So they have different people that they're trying to sell to. And I always start with, just like founder level, what is the strategy? What is the true strategy here? Like, what are you ultimately trying to become? What is the type of change that you're looking to make in the market? And what does success actually look like? If you do all the things right in one sentence, describe to me, what does success mean? And the reason I start there is because, before I do any mystery shopping or customer journey auditing or competitive intelligence, I really want to understand what is the mindset of the founder and what is their intention around growing their business? Why are they doing it in the first place? And what I'm really looking for is clarity because most companies don't actually have strategies, they have tactics. They might have a
Hmm.
go-to-market plan and they'll have a lot of tactics and they'll have bets that they're going to make in terms of making investments in certain areas of their business to grow or entering into new markets to grow. But ultimately, and I hate to say this, I'm typically I walk away from those conversations a little bit underwhelmed because I realize there is no strategy. There's no real clarity around what does success mean? What does it mean to be successful for this group of customers? But it is insightful when I start with those conversations because it gives me the signals in terms of what I need to pay attention to when I'm then doing the mystery shopping. So I don't really broadcast a lot. I'll typically just talk to the owner or the founder or the CEO. I'll get their inputs. And then I go in, as a prospect. Um, I audit the website. I look for information. I document how much time it takes to find what I'm looking for. I fill out forms. I have conversations with salespeople. I'll sit through a demo and I'm collecting, all of those touch points. How long did it take to get a demo? What were my impressions when I saw the product based on the requirements that I went into that demo looking for? What does the follow up look like? If I ask a good question or a bad question, either or, how do they handle it? What are their responses? I look for the asymmetrical opportunities where maybe the organization is not paying enough attention. I look for, okay, let's just say I'm going to buy this thing. Please send me a contract. I look for how the pricing is reflected in the contract. I look for any other supporting follow-up materials that is going to make my life easier as a buyer because they should know as a vendor that I have a lot of work to do internally to get my team on board with this. And I have to convince, my boss that this is a sound investment. So I pay attention to the entire experience of evaluating a product, interacting with sales, and ultimately purchasing it. And then I also do the same thing when it comes to post sales. I go in and I work through the implementation schedule. I talk to the customer success team. I interview existing customers. And I also interview customers who are not actual customers of my client, but they're the ICP. So they're well versed in the space. They might not know the brand that I'm working with, but they have a strong point of view in terms of we work with a ton of vendors and this is our general experience. And what I'm really trying to get then is a 360-degree impression of this journey map. I look at here's the perception and the narrative that I got from the founder. Here's my personal experience going through the customer journey. Here's the perception and insights that I get from existing customers. And here's the perception and insights that I get from their ICP that are not customers of theirs. And really, then I visualize the whole thing. I create a customer journey map with all of the touch points. I document every single interaction. I track speed, quality, surprise, and low and high emotional sentiments. So did the salesperson say something that intrigued me in a positive way? Did the salesperson say something or do something that actually made me feel unsure, kind of like a little bit of a trust corrosion moment? I remember there was one vendor I was doing follow up after a demo, and they wanted to send over a proposal. And before I even had a chance to like read through the proposal, because I was still on a live call with the sales rep, he started talking about, if you sign by the end of this week, we can offer 30% off of the licensing fees. Well, that seemed kind of unusual. Number one, you don't know if I'm having any issues with the pricing that you quoted to begin with. Number two, you're already offering some type of incentive or an offer to kind of create a sense of urgency out of me, even though I told you I'm actually evaluating a couple of other products, and this is probably going to take me 3 or 4 weeks before I'm in a position where I can make a final decision. So that kind of offset, that micro interaction offset my expectations, as well as it kind of stood out as a moment of creating a little bit of distrust, because I noticed through saying that this person was more worried about hitting their quota and driving a sense of urgency to get me to sign versus actually acting in a way that's in my best interest, or I perceive is in my best interest.
I
So
was just
these
going
are
to ask you if it was end of quarter by coincidence, and it probably was.
it was the end of September. So yes, it was end of quarter.
Mm.
So then when I do the audit, then it's having a very candid conversation, with not only the CEO at that point, but also the broader leadership team. And it's really not a blame game, because I don't look at an individual or a department as the problem. I just try to bring it in the context of a single experience from a customer, and how it doesn't really matter which department did what or where things accelerated or kind of fell flat. It's really about, from my perspective as a customer, this shaped my experience. And now I have a set of thoughts and questions associated with your brand, and it could be positive or negative. And that audit is really extensive, because we get into the granular details that often are not captured in a CRM of any sort. And then, depending on what their goals are and ultimately what they want to anchor their brand around, it's around creating what I call these signature experiences infused in the customer journey. So they're operationalized, they're codified, they're not like a campaign or a gimmick. They're things that are done repeatably and at scale. So as an example, the hypothetical example here, after doing this extensive audit, and I'll also, by the way, do the same thing with 2 or 3 of their competitors, I will point out where competitors are ignoring customers in the customer journey, and where we have an opportunity to do something different, to do something distinct. Whether, again, hypothetically, it's we're going to make the operational decision that, when a customer is interested in a demo, we're going to do same-day demos, always and forever.
Mhm.
That's one example. Or we are going to guarantee an implementation 10-day go live date, or you get your money back. Or we're going to guarantee 24/7 customer support, not with a chatbot, but a real human being whenever you need it. Those are hard things to scale, and they're precisely the things that actually define a brand. The harder it is to scale, the less likely a competitor could ever copy you, because it's distinctly you. And that is strategy. It's not even the product roadmap, although product roadmap plays a role in strategy. The real strategy is, what are we promising our customers we will do always and forever? And then you just have to live up to that. And then also, on the flip side of that promise, what are we promising never to do always and forever? And being crystal clear and distinct around that, asymmetrically, again, because competitors are maybe ignoring some of those customer journey moments. But if you can operationalize that, and I help them implement and operationalize it, I do a lot of team training as well, that then becomes your moat. Nobody else can copy you. It's in your unique DNA as a company culture, as an organization, as a brand, and it's going to make it easy for customers to prefer you, to remember you, to buy from you, and to refer you. Because now they have a story that they can tell that's tangible from their experience. Take, for example, a professional services firm. Let's say they do business accounting. Well, how can you really be distinct if you're an accounting firm? I live in Austin, Texas. There's probably hundreds of them here in this city. You know, they all basically do the same thing. Taxes, they'll help with filing, accounting services, monthly reports, quarterly reports, etc. They all fundamentally do the same thing. So if somebody comes to you and they're going to ask you like, "Hey, I'm looking for a new accounting firm. How do you position your accounting firm so it's going to be easy for a client to mention you?" "Oh, I know these guys. They're downtown. They're amazing." I actually, when we review our numbers every month with our account manager, the CEO always comes in and says hello. Okay, it's so simple. It's so small. It's distinct. But it's the one thing that somebody might remember, because that's the only differentiator perhaps that you need to have. It's like, we are the type of business where our leader makes it a point anytime we're talking to a customer to come in for 2 to 3 minutes, say hello, and see how we're doing. You do that consistently, it's repeatable, you do it always and forever. That's how you build that brand. And that's what people will remember you for.
I have so many follow-up questions on this, but we're, we're already going for a good while on the podcast here or on the episode.
Naturally.
I wanted to check if there's anything that you still want to highlight that I haven't asked or that we definitely need to dive into today to bring the point home.
I think I want to double down, on one thing that I said earlier. So I can kind of like close with this maybe. If you can live and breathe the experiences of your customers, step in their shoes, how they interact with your company, how they use your product, how they evaluate competitors, how they make decisions, and more importantly, what are the internal politics within their roles, within their organizations that they have to navigate through, you will be an indispensable asset to any company, whether you're working for a large company or a small company, whether you're starting your own business or you're a consultant or a freelancer, it really doesn't matter. To me, that is the competitive edge that I want every marketer to really embrace, is make it a point every single week to interact with your customers. And not just, your happy customers. Talk to your CS team and see, okay, pull a list of 15 customers who are detractors. They have like very low NPS scores or low CSAT scores. Talk to those people. Send them a really sincere personal email being like, "Hey, I know you've been with us for some time. I saw, in our dashboard that, you haven't really been thrilled with our product or our services. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to even try to change your mind. I just want to listen and understand, how can we do better?" Those are the types of conversations that marketers need to be having, I would say, every single week, because that's going to inform the clarity around how you're being perceived. And it's going to make everything that you do, from the campaign planning to the go-to-market strategy, to the messaging, to the positioning, to the creative, all of that is going to work so much better when you intuitively understand and you're in the same pulse as the people that you're trying to serve.
Thank you. And I think that should be everyone's New Year's resolution, whether it's calendar year or fiscal year. Make that your mission for whatever comes next. Andrei, thank
Absolutely.
you so much. You've been such a wonderful guest on the podcast today. I'm sure our listeners are gonna learn a lot from this episode. So I want to thank you again for coming on. You've been a delight to speak to. And yeah, I can't wait to hear the final edited episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.